Hi, my name is Kevin. I'm a developer and I want to help you build better side projects. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can use a login with GitHub Apps built with Node.js. So why should you use GitHub for login? Making a login and sign up is pretty hard. You have to do a lot of things correctly and it both takes time and code to produce. So for example, to make secure login, you have to both focus on password hashing, and today it's really nice if you also have two-factor authentication, and if a user forget your password, you also have to implement a way to recover that password. All the things that take a long time to implement and also to get right, and in the end doesn't really provide value. And GitHub already built this, so why should you build this? Why not focus on something that is providing a lot more value than building something that every app already has? So that's what I'm going to show you today. So GitHub also has this new app called Apps, and I want to show you that as well. It's lots better than the old platform that they had made because it's much better permission model. So in combining that with using this as a login platform, you can also actually extend your app easily if you're focusing, for example, on developers to use the GitHub and interact with that, which is a major plus. So what is difficult about why shouldn't this be pretty easy? And I'll say yes, it is pretty easy, and I want to show you today how you can do it really quickly, so when you start up a new project you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about which way should I do it and something like that. And I also want to show you can actually do it with less code than you think it actually needed. So how does it work? What is the process for making this, just in broad simple terms? So you're basically going to have a user that wants to log in, and the user clicks on the button and goes to the website we're going to make on login/GitHub. Then what we're going to do is we're going to redirect the user to GitHub, and if the user accepts, GitHub will redirect the user back to us. With that, we get a small temporary token, and that small temporary token basically gives access. We can exchange it at GitHub with our client secret to get an access token, and with that access token, we have access to the GitHub API. That's simple. So what we're going to do here in this code here, we're going to create a Node.js web server. We're going to redirect a user. When the user returns, exchange it for an exchange token, access token, and also I'm going to show you in the end how to set up a session to cookies for authorization, because it's actually pretty easy and it's a pretty good example for what you can do for the next steps. So with that said, let's do some coding. And first off, let's create a Node web server. So let's fire up our terminal here. We have it here, and let's create a project. Let's call it here a simple side project, and cd into that, and we want to here initialize our code here with Node.js, and we can then say npm install express, and we can install that, and then we can open up Atom, which I will use here in this case. You can use whatever editor you're most familiar with. And in here, we're going to make a new file, save this one as server.js, and we're actually going to use a new ES6 syntax, and I'm going to show you how you can run it as well. So we're going to say here import express from express, and we can then say here const app equal express and initialize this, then say app.get. We will respond with everything on the root, and we're just going to here make this so we can test that it works. And don't here, I've done this a couple of times so I remember, but let's call it a simple side project, and we're going to listen on the port we want to get from the environment. This makes it a little bit easy to customize, or it would be on port 9000, and then we can say here app.listen port and we can then, just to make it easy for ourselves, console log it out, listening, HTTP, and let us then test this. So this should work. This should make a simple web server with Express. Let's go to our terminal here, and we need one more module because if you try here to run this server.js, it will say like, I don't know this import statement, cannot use it outside a module. There's some back and forth, like you can use modules now in Node.js, but there's a module that makes it pretty simple for us to use both the new and old one, called ESM. So like install this, and now when we run our code, we can say node require, which will require it as like a initial module before the main module, and we can say require that, and then server. So you can now see here, now we are listening on port 9000, and we can try going to our browser here, and we can see it works. So that was the first step, and that was pretty simple. So let's look at what we're going to do now. The next thing we need to do is redirect the user. And you can see here on the screen, we have the URL that we need to redirect the user to. So, but first off, we need to make 2 new routes, because we're going to remember them when we create our new GitHub app, when we need to put them into the configuration. So you can see we need one that says login at GitHub, which will be the one that would initiate the redirect, and the login/GitHub/callback, that will be the callback URL. So let's create that, and then afterwards create the GitHub app on the website. So let's go to our editor. We can see here, let's make the 2 new routes. So app.get/login/GitHub, and here request response, and the same one here, but just callback. And we can now, with these 2 routes, we can then go to the website github.com and create our new app. So let's do that. Normally you would also be able to find all the information on GitHub's documentation if you go here to docs, apps, and then find identifying and authorizing for GitHub Apps. So, but this is a little more complicated. This is the only way you can find it. But let's create a GitHub app. You go to your profile here, you go up in the corner and you say settings, and then you can scroll down and find developer settings. Then you go up to here to GitHub Apps, and we can then click here new GitHub app. Then we take the name we had here for our simple side projects. We can use this, and we need to put in a home URL, homepage URL, and a callback for user authorization. So in here we will put in localhost 9000. That's because that's what is going to initialize it, and our user authorization callback. This is where we are going to take the same URL, and you can see I've done it a couple of times. Login GitHub callback, and this is where the user will be redirected back to when it has successfully clicked the prompts. And we can say here request user authorization during installation, and we're going down here as well, and we don't need the webhook. So with these 2 things, we can go down here and say create. So here we have client ID and client secret, and that's what we need to have. We can copy this to our application. You don't need to create a general private key, because we're not going to use the GitHub apps to interact server to server. Right now it's only the user information. So we can copy these 2 values in. Let's just copy the whole thing, and let's put it up here at the top and make it into proper variables. So we say here client ID equals to, and client secret. But This is not so good if you want to keep this in your project, because you don't want to commit this, and this client ID is okay to be public, but the secret is not. You're not supposed to share this with anyone. So what we can do is that we can store it in a file and load it from the environment, and that is pretty something we can do here. We basically create a new file here called .env for environment, and then we take our two secrets here, and normally for environment variables you would do it with uppercase letters, so client ID, and to make it a little more descriptive, say GitHub client ID and GitHub client secret. And here we have it, and we can then go in our code and instead load it from process.env.GitHub client ID and process.env.GitHub client secret. So this will enable us to load the variables in, and also depending on where we're running it, we can change out the value super easily without updating our code. So with this, let's just try to run this and see if it actually we can load it in. So we can say here client ID and client secret. So it's a good idea to test that actually works before we go any further, because if they are undefined, then that would be not so great. So now we're here in the terminal and we need to load it. As before, we're using this RSM to load it, and you can see if you do it now, it's a server.js, it will both be undefined. And we need a new module called .env, and we can install that, say .env, and then we can load it at the same way that you're using RSM. So say node rsm dot here .env/config, and this is part, it says in the documentation, but this is just a module to load when you load it from node require. And let's try it again, server, and you can see now our values are defined. So this is really good, but this becomes really tiring to write all the time. So let's just copy this and go to our package.json and add a start script here, start, and now we can just run npm start, and it will basically remember to write these things for us. So cool, now this is working. Now we need to take the redirect URL and redirect the user to this. So we'll copy this, we go to our server.js, we go into our login, which is going to initialize it, and we need to say rest.redirect, and we're going to redirect it to a URL, and this URL is going to be defined right here into two template tags. And let's replace the client ID, and the redirect URL is going to be hitting again localhost here. Let's put it in, we can change it later, localhost 9000, and it will be login GitHub/callback. And this is basically how you initialize the Oauth prompt. So we can try to restart the server, npm start, open this in our browser, say here we have the web server, we say login GitHub, and now we are getting prompted to, if you want to access simple side project by Kevin Simple, would like to access your account to verify it, and these are the default ones. You can change this so it doesn't work, and you will say authorize simple side project by Kevin Simple, and when the user clicks, you will get redirect back to the our application, and as you can see now it's spinning, but it's because we haven't implemented that. So that's our next step. So the third thing we need to do is that we need to exchange the token that we got when the user gets redirected back to us for an access token. And we can do that by, we need to send a post JSON request to this URL here, and it needs to include three things: our client ID, client secret, and code. And when we do this, we will get a response back, and it looks like this. It's URL encoded, and it has the access token equal, and then ampersand token type barrier. And we can then pass this with the URL search params. And once we have the access token, we can then send a request to api.github a user and get the user back. And then this way we can see who is it that we actually got the token back from. So let's go back to our code, and we need to implement it here in this callback now. So let's do this, and let's copy the, oh, not this one, yeah, like the code that we get back from the user is in the, so code here is in the request, and it's inside the query because it comes in as a query parameter like this, and it's inside. So here's a code, and this called code. So now we need to request this access token, but let's make a new function instead. So here's like, say here, get access token, and this will basically request it for the GitHub API. And let's copy this. This is all we need. This here. So this is the URL, and we're going to use node fetch for in this example here. So let's install this in our command. So we go here, npm install node fetch, and fetch is super simple. It's the same thing if you would use in the browser, and this way it's easy to remember the API when you also use it in Node.js. So we need to fetch this URL here, and this is the first parameter, and then we need to give it some arguments. We need to give a body, and we also need to give it some headers, and the headers is the content type, and that is application/JSON, and the body is it's going to be a string JSON, and we can then do this here and copy this in, and this will be then converted to a string. And let's see, what more do we need? We need to get in the code, and we can get the client ID from up here and the client secret. And let's see what we need more, and we just need to then wait for it. So let's make it an async function. So we will wait for the response, and here say data equal res.json, and we will also wait for that. So we fetch this with the data, and then we get back, and then what we can do is we will then pass this data, and as it actually is text, and we need to then say like here it's like a parameters, so new search URL search params and data, and then we can say params dot get access token. So this will return our code now when we give it the code, and return the URL search. And let me see if I spelled it correctly. So URL search params, yes, and you will get back the access token. Yeah. And we're using new because we instantiated it, and we are returning as a text, so it's really good. And we're returning the access token. So let's try to call this and say get access token, and we give it the code. And this also needs to be an async function, and we can say here we can say await, and we'll get token. So just for good measures, let's test this, that it actually works, and we can reply back with it to the browser and send it as a JSON. This will be super easy for us to debug. Oh, we made a mistake here. We need to remember to set a comma, and let's try to run it. npm start in our browser. Open up here, go to login/GitHub. As we already have authenticated. Oh, we made a mistake. Yes, of course, we need to make it into a post request. Post. And we also need to set a comma. Let's try again. As you can see here, now we have an access token for GitHub, and this we can now use to fetch the GitHub API. As we can see here, now we need to request this GitHub API with the headers, and where there's authorization and equal token with that. So let's try to do that. Here we will make a new function called async function get GitHub user, and this takes a access token, and we will again use fetch this API here. It will have some options. Set the headers. Authorization is important, is capitalized. Authorization, bearer, and then we can say here access token, and this can be a GET request. So request, and let's say here down here we want the data out from the JSON. And we need to await this and this as well. And what we get out, we can return that. So down here now in this function, we can say we can take the token and GitHub data await get GitHub user, take the token, and then again return the JSON GitHub data. So we can try this out now in the browser, log in, and now you can see this is all the data we get out. And now you can see, for example, I have the ID, we want that ID of my user ID, and we can make a test that say, for example here, if GitHub data equals to, or let's see, GitHub, if GitHub data.id equals to my user, then we can say hello Kevin, else we can say send not authorized. So this is a cool way that you basically can verify that this is you. If you can replace your own ID and be sure that, like, if you logged into this app, this is you. So on to the next step, where we will actually make a proper way to log in, so we don't have to always call the GitHub API whenever we want to check who the user is. We're going to use a module called cookie session, which is really great for these side projects because it's basically allowing for quick setup where we don't need any database, because all the data is stored in a cookie which is encrypted with a secret that we provide, and that means that the data is transferring back and forth, so we can just do it with minimal code. So let's jump into the code. The first thing we need to jump into we need to install it. So npm install cookie session, so we can use it, and then we can go into our code here at the top and require it. So import cookie session from cookie session, and then down here after the secrets, let's delete the client ID, and we don't need to log that anymore. We do, however, need a new cookie secret, so let's add this cookie secret process.env.cookie secret, and I did already added one up here. You can see here bongo cat. You shouldn't add something that people can guess, because if they can guess it, they can actually change the secret to be something that you don't want it to be. So just remember that. So here we can say like cookie secret, and we will then say app.use, and we say cookie session. We don't need to initialize it with new, and we give it a secret, and this is our cookie secret. So now we basically have a object called request.session. We can set anything in. So we scroll down to after login. Oh, I made a mistake here. This is actually a integer. So down here, instead of checking like who it is, we will just say if GitHub data, if we have data and it's not false, then we will set the session, and we're going to save two things. We're going to set the ID of the user, and we're going to set the access token, because that will enable us to check who the user is, and if we need more data, we can just request it from the API, and it will allow the cookie to not be that long in terms of like kilobytes. We would just say it here, call it GitHub ID, and set that to GitHub data.id. Then set also the token, session.token, and then we can do token. And if we didn't get anything, then an error happened, and we should probably also log this error. Then delete this code, and after we have set these two things, we want to redirect to, for example, an admin area. So rest.redirect admin. This is a good way to get started building a server where you have something like a admin things you can do. So app.get, let's scroll up a little bit, app.get admin, a new route here, and we can then say here we can get the request.session again, and we can check off like the GitHub ID from up here, and let's see, what was it? If GitHub ID, can we remember what it was? Let's just look a little bit back. It's before, it was 1100, and this, if GitHub ID is this, then we can say rest send hello Kevin, and we can also just dump the session. So if you want to debug it to see what is actually in there, and if not, then we can say like send not authorized login. login. We want to be careful not redirecting back, because that could make us into a redirect loop, and this should be pretty easy to just click if you want to test it. So it's also super simple to add a logout. Let's just say get logout. It's also just an HTTP route here. Let request response, add it, and the way to delete the session storage is set it to null, and then the session storage plugin or middleware will know that it has to delete the session, so we'll set an onset cookie from the client, and then we can just redirect to the front page. So that should be it. Now we're basically testing that who it is, or setting unauthorized, and asking to log in, and has a logout. So let's go and start the web server here, and we can go here and test that we can go to, for example, logout. That's work, and then we can try to go to login, and because we already accepted it, we already GitHub would just redirect it instantly, and you can see here we have our token, and we go try again logout, and we redirect, and if you go back to admin, you can see not authorized, and we can click login. So super simple way to add authentication and authorization to your side project. That could even work for serverless apps, and we are not even storing any data in our database. We're just storing it in the client in a cookie. So with that said, I want to remind you that you can see the blog posts for all the details. I've written one where you can also see all the codes, and there's also a GitHub project where you can see all the code and just copy and paste from my examples. So with that said, thank you for watching, and hope to see you in the next one.